Back. Today, we're going to be talking over kind of the news of the day, which is the huge patch. Um, so, obviously, some pretty big changes. Um, and I've kind of already taken a look over the patch notes just to get a better idea of what's going on. And I want to kind of share some of my thoughts. So, yeah, let's just get right into it. So, first off, right off the top, we've got a nerf to Nami. Um, so this one, you've gained the old text reads. You've gained 7+ spell mana this game. The new text reads. You've gained 8+ spell mana this game. Um, so this basically means that she's not going to be leveling up on turn 4. So in the past, you were able to bank 6 spell mana your first 3 turns if you were able to cast a 3 mana spell on turn 3 and summon no units before that point. And then you just need to cast 1 mana worth of anything on turn 4, land Nami, and boom, you already have her leveled up and buffing everything. So they're making her 1 turn slower, essentially, at her peak. So the earliest she'll really realistically gonna level is gonna be turn 5, unless you drop, I guess, another attune card with her on turn 4, which is pretty unlikely. There's only like one mana attune card, I think, and it's not very good. So I don't think we're gonna see turn 4 level ups on Nami anymore, which is a pretty big change. I think this is one of the more consequential ones we're gonna see today, just for the entire play style of this champion. I think overall she's still a pretty strong card. The ability to continuously buff the health stat was one of the things that we saw was, I guess, a little toxic. I'll say about something like um, the old Aphelios TF deck, where you're able to continuously buff the health stat with that landmark in the deck. So I think she's still really strong, but slowing her down 1 turn is going to be pretty impactful. And then there's a change to one of her other core cards that we'll come across later that might actually be the bigger impact on the something like the Zoe Nami deck. Next, we've got Draven. So Draven has pretty much been in every Demacia deck for a while now, except for some of the more burn-oriented ones. He's just so good as a card kind of junk card creator. Anything that has to do with discard or like a lot of P and Z Noxus combinations will use like the discard and draw cards like Rummage um, in order to gain card advantage over the course of the game, like the Draven Ezreal deck or the Draven Scion deck. This is actually a really impactful hit here. Hitting the health stat from 3 to 2 on the level 1 is actually really huge. So this puts him in. I guess the most common card is going to be the Mystic Shot range. He's also an Avalanche range. Basically, there's a lot of things that deal 2 damage in this game, and not as many things that deal 3 damage. So this is actually a really big change. I think we're going to see Draven win rates drop off quite a bit. Like I just can't overstate how big of a hit this is to the health stat, because a 3 mana 3/3 quick attack with the ability to create some cards was, I mean, he was just straight up one of the best cards in the game. Um, so I guess this time around they felt the need to balance him a bit, which I wasn't exactly expecting because he hasn't been crazy strong, but he's always been quite strong. So I mean that nerf to the health stat is actually going to be really impactful. So I'm curious to see if that knocks him out of any decks, if it has an adverse effect on something like the Draven Scion deck. Um, I think it puts even more nails in the coffin of the Draven Ezreal deck because they rely on Draven a bit. So I think he's just got a lot weaker. and it's going to be even harder to get his level 2. Not that you get it very commonly, anyways, but it's going to be even harder to get there. And then we're seeing a lot of buffs this time around, which I really like. I'd rather them, buff the cards that don't get played rather than nerf everything to the ground so everything's unplayable. Um, so let's see. So Tristana is first. I don't think this is enough to get her to a solid place. So let's go look at her level 1. Let's go look at her level 1 real quick. So her level 1, right. Quick attack. I have +1/+0 for each multi-region ally you summon this game. When you summon a multi-region ally, grants it +1/+0. And then she flips when you've summoned 4+ multi-region allies, which isn't necessarily a difficult condition to do. It is harder than something like just 4+ regions because it actually needs to be 4+ multi-region allies. So she's never going to level up on curve, like into turn 3, because you're pretty much only going to have landed 2 multi-region allies max by that point. So she takes a bit of investment in the deck building process and a bit of time to level. So her level 2 change is that she not only grants her allies impact, but she also grants herself impact. I think this is interesting, but I don't think it's going to be enough to make her viable necessarily. I think some of the decks with her in it have been decent so far. Like there's a deck with her and Sivir um, that runs that one elusive card. Let's go find it. PNZ. Oop. Let's take that off. Sorry. It's the 2-cost card. So ambush. So there is a Tristana Sivir deck running something like. Oh, sorry, not ambush. I have that wrong. No, it's the Bandle card, 5 cost. Shell game. Sorry about that. Wrong card. That's the Vi deck I'm thinking about. So they're running Shell game to give an ally elusive this round. So giving Tristana elusive is obviously a really big deal, or giving Sivir elusive can make your whole board elusive. So as Riot said here, just like a little extra help. Um, I think it's decent. I don't think it's enough, but I guess time will tell. And also, some of the multi-region allies that she has got nerfed, so it might actually just not get her anywhere, just because you have less inclination to play a totally multi-region ally-focused deck. Nocturne. So basically, on its level 2, before the Nightfall effect fell off, now the Nightfall effect stays, which is really nice because level 2 Nocturne sometimes felt worse than level 1 Nocturne when you played him because he didn't have this Nightfall effect. I think this is good. I don't think it's enough to get Nightfall back to being a real deck. I think it might help a little bit. I think there's just some more fundamental problems with that deck. Um, Especially with, let's go back here. Let's go Shadow Isles 3-cost. Do. Is it still showing in 2-cost? Let me find it. Sorry about that. So it's the card that like you can search the top of your deck and create a copy. Ooh, I'm totally missing it right now. Oh, Stalking Shadows. There we go. So I think Stalking Shadows was actually the primary engine of the Nightfall deck. You kind of need this on 2 mana to help, 1, enable Nightfall easier. 3's a little clunky when you're playing a faster deck like Nightfall. Um, and then 2, just you're going to have less. Like, it's just not a good card anymore in comparison to what it used to be on 2 mana. So I don't think Nocturne's going to bring Nightfall back. I think it gives Nightfall lovers almost a bit of a bait to play it again. I mean, it's decent. I just don't think it's going to be enough. Um, I guess landing a Nocturne with the Nightfall and then playing some other units behind him might be enough to give a crazy swing at some point where you give everything -1, -0 a couple times and just swing for the win. Maybe that happens. I'm not so sure though. Then we move on to Echo. So it's moving from you've predicted 5 times to you've predicted 4 times. This is good. I mean, it helps potentially level up Echo a turn earlier, or maybe even on curve if you have just like a really predict focused deck. Um, it really increases the chance of you landing Echo leveled, which is really what you want to do. His pre-leveled form is super weak. Dies to Mystic Shot, Avalanche, all the things I was talking about with the Draven earlier. But his level up is one of the most impactful level ups out there because you just get such a strong power spike. Because your time tricks are free. You get the what is it, the card called the Chrono Shift, where you get to revive everything and rally. That's just a massive power swing. Um, so I think this does help. It might add a little bit of win rate to like Echo Zillion decks or something like that. I think the whole predict, like building your entire deck around predict, is just a bit of a flawed deck, like from a card advantage standpoint. Like you're just a lot of times you're just spending cards to predict, which doesn't actually get you another card in a lot of cases. So I don't know that it's ever going to be tier one. But for anyone who loves playing Echo out there, I think this does help make him a little more relevant. Brilliant Soul gets this reverted. So this is how he originally came out, I believe. Your allies have 20 plus power instead of your allies have 25 plus power. He's balanced a little bit more now by the speed of the format and by loop travelers being a thing because it'll always hit Aurelion Soul. Um, so I think this is a really good revert to make Aurelion Soul playable again. I'm definitely going to be experimenting with him. There's some other changes to dragons coming later that I think make dragons pretty fun again. I think this is going to be really impactful. I think we're going to start seeing Aurelion Soul running around again because this is a lot easier to pull off. That 5 power difference is just it's huge. So I'm really excited about this change. I personally do like slapping a big Aurelion Soul on the on the field and just kind of winning. So I think that one will be fun. Renekton gets a quality of life change, so it goes from I've dealt 12 plus damage to I've dealt 10 plus damage. Obviously, a lot easier to pull off. Still will take 2 turns at the very least, like the vast majority of the time. Um, but I think it will be, enough to get him a little more playable, not enough to actually make a big impact on the game. I don't think he really has a deck that he fits well into. He doesn't fit very well into Mono Shurima. To be honest, like he just has kind of an awkward level up requirement for them. I think Xerath's is probably the best for the Mono Shurima deck. The Overwhelm deck, where you would run Renekton, Ruin Runner, and a bunch of Overwhelm units, has kind of fallen off because of, well, Ruin Runner. It wasn't that great before, but Ruin Runner kind of getting nerfed hurt that a lot. So I don't think he has a real natural home right now. Um, but he at least has some hope, which is good because I mean, 12 plus damage was a bit much, maybe, um, but he's got a chance to make an impact now. Now this one is super crazy. People have been asking for a Lux remake for a very long time. I think this nails a lot of the issues. So one, she came down too late at 6 cost. Now she's 5 cost with a reduction in stats. Just the attack stat, which really never matters for Lux. Health stat critically stays the same. I thought they would have brought her down to like a 3/4 or something like that. And they might need to if she turns out being a bit too strong. I think a 5 cost 3/5 is perfect for an engine like her. And then her level 2 Final Spark can be cast to directly attack the enemy Nexus if they have new units on the field. This is actually a really huge change. So one of the biggest counterplays, to having something like Lux Karma back in the day was you could just not have any units on the ground and Final Spark would not be able to touch you. Now you can shoot Final Spark directly to the face and just keep dealing a bunch of damage that way. So it gives you a very reliable clock near the end of the game if you're able to keep casting some spells. I think Lux is gonna be really exciting to play with. I think day one of this patch, that's the one I'm most excited about right now is playing some Lux. Just because we haven't seen her in a very long time, and a lot of it was because of that 6 cost requirement. This is just a nice change. I don't even know if it's necessary to get her playable. Quinn goes from a 3/4 to a 3/5, so basically just a 1 health stat buff. I think this is fine. I think she really needed something like Quick Attack to be useful because she does actually need to attack in order to make use of her level 2 form. And if you're scouting into a board, the 1 extra health isn't going to protect you that much for too long. So I think Quick Attack really is what she needs. It might make her a bit too strong, so maybe that's why they didn't do it. Uh, I think it adds a little bit. I don't think it adds enough to make her really playable. Braum, they just gave him a 1 health stat buff. I think this is good. Uh, I see nothing wrong with this. Giving him 1 power was too strong, as we saw. I think that was maybe last year where they gave him one attack buff and he just took over the entire game by being too strong. So I think this is fine. I don't really see any problems with this. It means that he can level in 2 turns potentially if you just deal 5 damage to him each turn. So I think it is very relevant getting him to 6 health here. Um, I don't know if it'll be enough, but it's something we can see. All right. Now we get on to followers, spells, and landmarks. So Sparklefly, it's going from 2 cost to 3 cost. This card's dead. I'm calling it now. I think this card is now trash. One of the biggest reasons to play it was that you could go grab it with Gifts from Beyond, going into the Crescendum. So summon a 2 cost follower from your deck. That's pretty much entirely how Nami Zoe dealt with aggro. Was getting the Sparklefly and making it really big, and then if they can't deal with a big like 7/5 lifesteal elusive, which not many aggro decks can, they're kind of dead. So I think this is actually the nail in the coffin for that Zoe Nami deck. I don't think they needed to nerf Nami and this. I think that deck is actually just toast. Um, I might be wrong. But not being able to grab Sparklefly with your Gifts from Beyond, I think that's going to be critically damaging to the playability of Sparklefly. I think it's just gone. um, that one. I mean, there's the other card in Targon that's a 3 cost card. Fledgling Stellacorn. This never sees play. It's 1 mana too expensive with 2 weak of stats. It's a similar type of card to the Sparklefly, except it has the spell shield instead of the elusive. It also doesn't see play. They're both strong buff targets, but three mana is just too prohibitive. I don't think it's going to be able to come back at this point. Twinblade Revenant. So this one was really interesting. I knew they were going to do something to Revenant / Lost Soul because it was just really strong in the Draven Scion deck. So they changed the keyword, which I wasn't expecting. I don't think anyone was expecting this, to be honest. So they changed the keyword from challenger to fearsome. So first off, I think this is a fantastic change. I think this is a really good way to deal with this. So challenger allowed a lot of board control for the Draven Scion deck that they're not going to get anymore. Fearsome is fine for just dealing damage to the opponent, but it's not as good at taking out stuff like Zoe. I can't tell you how many Zoes or Eye of the Dragons that I've lost to Twinblade Revenant or had to protect from Twinblade Revenant with a stun or something like that. So I think this is a really good change. I think it will definitely have a bigger impact on something like Draven Scion than you might think at first, just because Challenger is a really huge deal. I also don't think Challenger really belongs in Noxus. I mean, we don't really have many Challenger cards in Noxus. And Fearsome is just a better fit for the whole Scion kit. So I'm really happy about this. I think it'll make a bigger impact than you might think at first, just because I'll admit Draven Scion is how I got to Masters and climbed Masters. So I know that this Challenger keyword is something that the opponent had to think around all the time. Um, you could take out pretty much any threat when you're for attack card. So I'm really happy with this change overall, just flavor wise and power level wise. Tenor of Terror and Base of Burden. So they got their base stats changed. So Tenor of Terror went from a 2-3 to a 1-3, and then the Base of Burden went from a 3-2 to a 3-1. This is a crazy strong nerf. Like, I think these cards are unplayable main deck now. Just because, so you're paying 4 mana for basically a 4/4 2 impact worth of stats. I don't think it's that strong anymore. I mean, 2 bodies is always better than one, is kind of the conventional wisdom. But a 3/1 trades horribly, especially with impact. And a 1/3 is just not strong enough power wise, because you can just block that all day, even with the impact. You block it with a 3/2 and you take it out. I think these cards are dead as far as main deck goes. I mean, you'll still get them off of Mayors or Loping Telescopes or something like that, and they can still be good in certain situations. But this is one of the reasons I don't think that Tristana is really going to make a resurgence or a. I guess she never was that good. That's one reason I don't think Tristana is going to make a big splash. Is because this card gets you 2 of those multi-region ally summons, and I think they're just really bad now. So I'm a little. I'm pretty skeptical on these making it anywhere now. I think these stat changes are just like a really big impact because it was coming down as a 4 mana 5/5 essentially with split between 2 bodies and with impact, which was too strong. Now I think it's coming down a little too weak. So maybe they add the health stat back on this one. Uh, I think I like this one more than this change. One health is just too weak for 4 mana. Moving on, Relentless Pursuit. This one I was a little bit shocked by. I wasn't expecting this one at all. So they changed the cost from 3 to 4, and it now grants a target ally +1/+1. So that is grant. So that is a permanent effect. But I think this just makes it strictly, or not strictly worse, but I think this just makes it worse than the Golden Aegis now. So this one grants an ally barrier this round in Rally, which is relevant for something like Sivir, because then Sivir would give everyone barrier on the attack. And a lot of things are good with barrier. Anything with Challenger or anything like that. Granting an ally +1/+1 is not crazy. I I just don't think this deck is. I mean, I just don't think Relentless Pursuit's very good anymore, and this kind of critically hurts those decks that are running like 6 rally cards. they would run 3 Relentless Pursuit, 3 Golden Ages, and then maybe some of them were running the Yordles and Arms depending on what regions they're running. I don't think those are going to be as good anymore. Just because I think this 4 cost Relentless Pursuit is really bad. I think it's actually just kind of a bad card now. I mean, this went from being a 3 cost fast, which was nuts, to being a 4 mana slow with a pretty negligible effect later in the game. So I think Golden Ages is still fine. I think that's at a decent power level, but I think Relentless Pursuit is one. These cards are a little bit too close now in what they do, so I think they're redundant, which I don't like. It just, I guess, it gives you the ability to run 6 copies of Golden Aegis, really, but I just think that they've lost kind of their uniqueness from each other. So I'm not super happy about this change. I get it, power level wise, but I just don't think it's very. I'm just not sure why why they did it. Stone Stackers, I love this change. I think a 2/3 is a lot easier to deal with than a 2/2 tough. It was just too good and stuff like the Yordle burn deck. And it also there's one key interaction. Just switching between these real quick. Um, but the Imperial Demolitionist was able to basically ping the Stone Stackers for free and give you no counterplay or downside for doing it. So I think that's actually a really that's the biggest interaction that has changed, and the ability to take it out in like 2 turns with like a 2/2 and a 1/1 blocker or something like that. So I really like that change. I think that's exactly the power level Stone Stackers needs to be at. It's still really strong. A 2/3 impact is still strong, but tough was a little bit too much. So I'm happy with that. Another one I'm happy with is the Aloof Travelers. It just lost 1/1 of base stats, so it goes down to a 2/3. So 4 mana 2/3, not a great stat line, but it still has a really strong effect. So you're basically keeping your opponent off of a draw, or off of a win condition in a lot of cases, um, and then also cycling itself. So I think this one is now where it needs to be. I think it'll be less annoying since you don't have everyone playing it now. I think it's because I like the effect on it. I just think a 4 mana 3/4 was too many stats for it. So I'm pretty happy with that. Now we're looking at Targon changes. So they're just buffing small buffs to a couple of cards just to make it a little bit more relevant. So Moondreamer goes from 3/5 to 3/6. I don't think this has much impact. I think it's just a bit slow. Um, not much else I can really say about it. Uh, I think it might see a bit more fringe play, but it's not going to be like a meta breaker or anything like that. Lunari Priestess goes from a 3 mana 2/1 to a 3 mana 2/2. This is a pretty good change. This is a pretty good change. So it doesn't get Vile Feasted right away anymore. It can actually serve as a decent blocker and trader. So I like that change. I think it becomes a little bit more of a relevant card. I think Lunari Priestess has always been more awkward than the Solari Priestess, though, since you can just drop Solari Priestess on turn 3 without any setup, whereas you do need to set up the Lunari Priestess. Plus, invoking across the entire range of mana options is actually slightly worse in a lot of cases, because sometimes you just want a more targeted invoke. So this buff to Solari Priestess is actually a really big deal. This is already a playable card. A 3 mana 1/2 with the invoke of 4, 5, or 6 mana Celestial card is already playable. Now seeing it with a stat boost here with the 2 attack, so it can trade better. I think this card makes some waves. I think that's a really good. I think that's a really solid card. It might even. I'm not sure if it's too strong, just because Targon's super weak, but it definitely is the most impactful one that I can see here out of the Targon buffs. So I mean, I think Lunari Priestess is okay. I think Solari Priestess is really strong now. And then Ravoon, he got a 1 health buff, which is good, but I think Daylight just has issues still. I think people will try it. I don't think it'll be good enough to make a splash. It like with the change to Solari Priestess and Ravoon, we might see Daylight get a little bit better, but I still don't think it's crazy. And then the Scourge. So it went from just having Challenger to having Challenger and Overwhelm. So it has Overwhelm along with on the attack, granting all of your allies or giving them +2/+2 and Overwhelm this round. I think this is a really good change. I think it makes some of those kind of late game invoke strategies a bit stronger. This is also pretty nuts with a leveled Zoe because you're granting permanently everything Overwhelm because it has the actual Overwhelm icon there. I like this. I like this. I mean, it's still pretty fringe, and it's not like you can main deck it. So it's basically a strategy built around invoking really big cards later on in the game. But I think it makes a better target than it did before. All right, so now we get to some of the dragon buffs. So Dragon's Clutch might be a bit of a hot take here, but I think this is actually the biggest. I think this might actually be the biggest buff that we've seen today. I think this single-handedly makes dragons a lot more viable. So it went from draw 2 different dragons or grant dragon allies +1/+1. You like 99% of the time don't use this. Just granting dragon allies +1/+1 isn't very good. They usually already have good stat lines, and you'd rather just take your turn 3 off to draw a couple cards. Yeah, exactly. Targon Demacia Dragons. That's the first thing I'm playing after this. I think it's super relevant. I think it's super strong with Aurelion Soul buff and the Dragon's Clutch buff. I think Targon Demacia Dragons is back. Uh, so back to the change. So now you can grant Dragon allies +1/+1 and Overwhelm. So this is a grant, and I think that's super relevant. This isn't just a one-term thing. I think it probably, with the power level of this card now, they'll probably revert it to being just a one-turn Overwhelm. I think granting them Overwhelm is absolutely nuts because you're going to get a lot of really big dragons near the end of the game, right? So let's just go look at the 7+ cards, and so something like Eclipse Dragon. This is played in pretty much every dragon deck. Imagine this with Overwhelm on like turn 8. That's nuts. And then you have some of your big other things like Great Beyond, like they can't chump block that anymore. Your Aurelion Soul, like let's say you curve into Eclipse Dragon on the Daylight, and then Aurelion Soul turn 8, and then you cast Dragon's Clutch for the Overwhelm. That is crazy. And yeah, I agree with you. I think I love Overwhelm for dragons. I'm not sure if it should be a grant effect. I don't think this +1/+1 is actually that useful at all. I think it's just like dragons are already super strong stat line wise. They just get chump block really easily. So you'd have like a whole board of 7/7s, and they'd be able to block with their 1/1s pretty much infinitely. But now they can't because you have this card. You're just going to run this as a 3-of in every dragon deck now and grant them all Overwhelm. I think this card is insane. I mean, I'm really excited to play it. I think it instantly, with the Aurelion Soul change, makes dragons a top tier deck. I think it's going to be tier 1 or like high tier 2. It's nuts. All right, so Ruined Dragon Guard base stats go from a 2/4 to a 3/4. So first off, rip Badger Bear. I already made a meme about this and posted it on Reddit. So Riot giving a lot of love to a couple of these Demacia cards, and then just absolutely dumpstering Badger Bear, which is just a vanilla 3/4, which used to be a vanilla 4/4, in case you remember that. But now Dragon Guard and Vanguard Sergeant are just like completely better. than Badger Bear, so there's literally no reason to main deck the Badger Bear. You're only going to get it off of the one scout unit that pops him out when he dies. So, I mean, rip Badger Bear. I mean, it was nice knowing you, but you're never going to get main decked again at this state. Um, let's get back over here. So, Ruined Dragon Guard, with all of the dragon changes we're seeing, Dragon Guard might actually get some play. I think so. The ability is when an ally with Fury kills a unit, granted an additional +1/+1. I think that's really good. Not really good. It's passably good, I think. But having a strong 3/4 on turn three is not a bad curve to go into. Um, so I'm pretty happy with this change. I think it could see some play. It's strong with something like Shyvana. It's strong with the Challenger Dragon. Um, it has some potential. I'm not sure if it's a three of in every dragon deck. I think dragon decks are going to be a little slower, a little more control-y, and play Aurelion Soul at the top. So I'm not sure if he'll actually see much, but he can help stabilize the board. Because a 3/4 blocker, um, I mean, that blocks a lot of 3 power cards more effectively. Like a 3/3, it blocks favorably into a 3/3. So pretty happy with that. Herald of the Dragons. This is one that people have been asking for a long time. So dragon allies cost 1 less, which is obviously a really good effect. And we don't have a whole lot of really good like ramp in Runeterra. It's much more popular in something like Magic the Gathering. But buffing this up to a 1/2, I think makes it a playable card again. So I think we'll see it in some of the dragon ones that want to get greedy, want to get stuff out fast. So I think it'll see play. All right, so miscellaneous buffs. So Faces of the Old Ones. This is a necessary buff because I think one of the most common things that would happen when I used to play this card a bit more with some ramp was, the opponent's developing a board. You want to use your Avalanche, but you have to decide if you want to keep your Faces of the Old Ones alive and not use Avalanche, or use your Avalanche and just kind of waste a card. So I think that 3 health is a really big deal here. Because that's also what the Wording Stones has too. I think it's also a 0/3. Let me go check. Yeah, so it's also a 0/3 here. So I think the combo of these two is actually pretty good now. It might actually make a splash. Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned with Draven earlier, like the change from 2 health to 3 health and the other way around is probably the most impactful health shift of the game. Maybe the 1 to 2 health is, but I think in this case it's huge because now you can avalanche and actually have it survive, like with wording stones. So that's just a really impactful. That's a really impactful change. And yeah, Mystic Shot's really good. So, um, yeah, that's the Mystic Shot test is always something to look out for. And now we have Vanguard Sergeant. So it goes from a 3/3 to a 3/4. So once again, rip our friend the Badger Bear. He's just useless now. Um, so I think Vanguard Sergeant. I think for Demacia is it's a little bit of a clunky card, but maybe at a 3/4 you start seeing him. I don't think it's gonna necessarily make elites better. Yeah, elites exactly. Uh, I think elites is still borderline, but I think it could help. It could definitely help. I think just a 3 mana 3/4 is a really strong stat line in this game. Um, so yeah, I think it could see some play. Maybe more specifically elites. I'm not sure if it's actually going to see splashes outside of that specific strategy, but there's always a chance. I'd be curious to see what people come up with here. Des and Ada is actually one of the biggest changes in my opinion. So Des and Ada's effect used to just deal 2 damage across all allies, and now the damage dealt actually scales with darkness damage. So let's say your darkness is at 4, Like you've had a couple twisted catalyzers hit, and now your darkness is at something like 4 or 5 even. Uh, I mean, this is a full board wipe in most cases. I mean, basically, it is. It's basically go hard. I mean, once you get to pack your bags, let's deal 5 damage across all enemies in the enemy nexus. Death and Ada still won't hit the nexus, but if you get your darkness damage up to a decent point with your either Vagar stacks or Twisted Catalyzer, I think this could see some real play in darkness decks. I think it actually might be a good top of the curve option for them now. Because it wasn't quite good enough before to see play in that. It saw play in the kind of Elise Vi style deck, which that isn't really going to change because it's still going to deal 2 damage because darkness never levels up in that deck. Um, but I think it actually gets a lot better in the actual like focused darkness deck. Darkness is also getting a big change in the bug fixes. Okay, I actually didn't see that yet, so I'll have to go look at that. Um, so interesting here. We'll see if it gets some play. So additionally, we've made some rule changes to Trinket Trade, Traveler, and Loping Telescope. These cards will no longer be able to create themselves when played. I think that's actually a huge change, especially for Loping Telescope, um, because that pretty much makes sure you can't do an infinite Looping Telescope uh, cheese with the Bandle City Mayor down. Trinket Trade is also a really big one because you can't go Trinket Trade into Trinket Trade with the Shellfolk deck, which is actually one of the ways that you kind of kept the combo going. Traveler's a little less impactful. Since it's at 4 mana, it's a little harder to kind of loop that, but still, minor impact. So I think Loping Telescope and the Trinket Trade in their own ways are going to be pretty big. Something people have been asking for too, so I'm glad they kind of listened up to this. Going to see some new lab stuff. Uh, I really like this round start effect update. I think this actually has a really big impact. So if you've played Bandletree against another Bandletree deck, and you're both at 10 stacks at the end of the turn, basically whoever was taking their turn first the next turn would actually just win the game. Like they wouldn't go at the same time. Now that same situation will result in a draw. So I think that's actually a really good way of dealing with things because you've both gotten your bandle tree to 10 and just whichever player's going next, I don't think is necessarily the correct way to decide who wins the game. So I like this change. And then, yeah, just everything's more consistent. I think it's a little more easy for people to understand that. Like, if I have something that's going to win me the game at the beginning of the game, it'll actually just trigger at the same time as someone else's. So I like that change. Bug fixes. So fix an infinite loop issue where Glorious Evolution will allow a player to summon Evershade Stalker an unlimited number of times. Runeterra really does not like having infinite combos, which I also enjoy to not have. Just seeing someone loop a card a bunch of times isn't very fun, isn't very interactive, and it kind of just makes you want to quit. um, Mimic will now correctly copy non-champion spells and will no longer reveal created cards to the opponent. Okay, but I wasn't aware of this one because I don't think I've seen Mimic see much play. Fixed a bug where Prank could occasionally increase the cost of a card beyond playability or drop its health to 0. Um, Interesting. So you can no longer increase a card's cost beyond imagining 13 for spells and maybe 10 for units. See, I've seen some 15 mana darknesses before where you just keep pranking it forever and then they just get locked out of the game. Or drop its health to 0, so you're not going to have any shenanigans on those fronts. Spell Shield will now correctly block Strafing Strike. Okay, Curious Shellfolk will now correctly create copies of champions when used with Predict. Oh, wow, okay. Copies of champions are pretty much always good. Overgrown stat vine and Tristana will now display correct keywords. Fixed an issue where prank would not target landmarks in the opponent's hand. Um, I wasn't aware of this one, but that's nice. I mean, just want everything to work more consistently. Fixed an issue where darkness could be created in hand before a cast copy is resolved. Oh, I see what you're saying now. I see what you're saying. So basically, when you attack with Senna and you cast the darkness, you would not get a new darkness in hand, correct? I'm imagining that's how it works. Because the cast copy won't be resolved yet, it'll still be on the stack. So you wouldn't be able to create a new one in hand when it's on the stack. I'm assuming that's I'm assuming that's how that works. Okay. Yes. Okay. That's actually a really big deal. That's a really big deal because that was a way to kind of cheat out a bunch more darknesses. Yeah, because it's fast speed. Okay. Yeah, I interesting. Okay. Yeah, I mean, we'll see how much that hits darkness. I think it could hit them a decent amount, just because Senna is kind of an integral part of that deck. Cool. All right. I did not know that that was. It's kind of nestled down here, but it's actually a really important gameplay mechanic. I think they should bring more attention to some things like this. Then none of these are super important down here. Oh, so Zillion's ability will now correctly duplicate Relic of Power and Sentinel's Horde. That's important in any kind of like Akshan Zillion deck. And then just fixed some overall bugs. So okay, so couple pretty important bug fixes here. Um, Overall, I'll just kind of scroll through one more time just to take a look at these. So I think Nami is going to be hit really hard mostly because of Sparklefly. I think this does make a difference. She gets leveled one turn slower, but losing that life gain, that reliable life gain, is going to be really tough for her. So we'll have to see how Nami shakes out. I don't know if she's actually going to be a tier one deck anymore. Draven Change, I wasn't expecting this one, but doesn't pass the Mystic Shot test anymore. Or Avalanche, which are kind of my two damage spells that I think of. That's gonna be pretty rough for Draven. I don't. I think he's gonna get quite a bit worse after that. Tristana, I don't know if she's actually strong enough still, especially with something like the Tenor of Terror and Base of Burden getting nerfed. Um, we'll see, but I still don't hold that much hope for her being a super strong card. Nocturne, that's a really good quality of life change. Should have been this way before. I don't know why they didn't do this sooner. Echo, I like this one. Echo's fun. He has some good shenanigans. Get it, and really, you don't want to cast him level one ever, just because he dies so easily. But if you can cast him level two more consistently, you're gonna have a much stronger deck. Aurelion Soul, I'm super excited about this. I think dragons are gonna be nuts. The Targon Demacia Dragon deck is coming back for sure. Because you got a critical buff to Aurelion Soul and then a critical buff to the support card. Renekton, I think he's fine. I I think that's a good change. I still don't think he's crazy strong. Or it's not that he's not strong. I just don't think he necessarily has a deck that he fits in really well into. Um, but we'll see. Lux, I'm super excited about. Um, I think going to 5 mana is obviously a huge deal because then your turn 6 is open to cast turn like a 6 mana spell. That just makes a lot of sense. Um, and then the final spark can be cast directly on the enemy nexus. That's also a really big quality of life change. Quinn, not sure if Quinn's good enough. I think she really needs quick attack to get to the next level there, just because she's gonna die in like one or two attacks by this point in the game anyway. So I just don't think she's still just too slow on turn 5. Braum, nice little quality of life change. I'm glad that they did not give him the power stat back because he was too strong when he had it. but I think 0/6 is good. Sparklefly's dead. I just that's too big of a hit. If you can't grab it with your Crescendum, it's just a much weaker card. Twin Blade Revenant, super happy with this change. I think Challenger was just too much board presence for the Scion Draven deck. Um, Fearsome makes it good into some matchups, and still like you can still loop it infinitely, which is critical for the Scion Draven deck. I don't think it'd be a relevant deck without being able to do that. Um, but I think this is just better overall. And then for flavor, I think Challenger in Noxus is a weird. Like I don't think it necessarily fits. I think Fearsome's good. Tenor of Terror Base of Burden. I have pretty strong feelings about this. I think it's too weak now. I don't think it's gonna be main deckable. You might grab it off of a Mayor or a Telescope at some point, but I just don't think it's. I don't think it's making into. I don't think it's main deck material. Relentless Pursuit. I'm a little confused about why they nerfed it so hard. I think it's just worse than Aegis now, and it just kind of seems like a duplicate card. Um, I don't know. I think it. I think it. I think that's a really big hit. I think it might get reverted at some point, but I think they hit Demacia pretty hard there. Stone Stackers, like this is one of the ones I'm most happy about, just because you're able to use the Demolitionist on Stone Stackers for free, essentially. So just getting like 2 free damage to the Nexus every time you did that. I think just a 2/3 is way better. It's way more balanced. Believe Travelers, we were all expecting some kind of stat nerf because it still needs to have this ability to be the card that it wants to be. So it'll only be run in specific tech situations now, or something you grab off of Mayor, or you're still running something like Bandletree deck, just to keep opponents off of big stuff. But it's not going to be as like blanket good as it used to be. Moondreamer, I think it's still fine. It's still a little bit of a meh card. 3/6 is a pretty good blocker though, so maybe. Lunari Priestess, that's a pretty good stat increase. The 1 health is pretty prohibitive. I think having to trigger Nightfall is going to be kind of what makes this card more difficult. Plus, the wider range of invoke options isn't always a good thing. I like Solari Priestess already. I think 3 mana 1/2 still wasn't bad. It still saw a lot of play, but a 3 mana 2/2 with that ability, I think is going to be pretty great. I think it's going to see a lot of play. Ravoon going to 5/6. I don't think that's super relevant. Scourge in something like a Nami deck, like a Nami invoke deck, I think it's pretty strong because you can give everything Overwhelm. And then itself having Overwhelm makes you want to pick this a bit more. Because really you had no reason to. You had some reason to pick this, but it's a little clunky because it doesn't have the spell shield, which a lot of these top of the line invoke cards have. So I think it's pretty decent now. Dragon's Clutch is absolutely nuts. They're not gonna let this be a thing forever. They're definitely gonna nerf that. I think just granting Dragon allies Overwhelm is just it's so strong. I think that's insane. Ruined Dragon Guard's pretty good now. I could see that getting some play. Just have to see what deck it fits into. Herald of Dragons 1/2 is a lot better than a 1/1, like a huge amount better than a 1/1. So being able to get Shyvana out reliably on turn 3 is going to be pretty important in a dragon deck. So I think that's strong. I think that'll get play. Face of the old ones, that's a good little quality of life nerf. Freljord Ramp still isn't good, but it has at least a chance now. Vanguard Sergeant, again, pretty decent. Pretty decent. It'll be good in elites, which is maybe tier 3-ish. Still has some possibility though. And then Detonata makes a pretty good argument for being in a darkness deck now. I think, and then not being able to create themselves, that's also a really strong change. So I think I've covered pretty much everything. Overall, I'm really happy with everything that they've done. I'm a little confused by this whole thing, like why Badger Bear is just such a forgotten about card now. I mean, it was probably too strong as a 4/4 vanilla. Maybe at the current game state, you could go 4/4. Um, but yeah, I mean, these cards clearly overshadow it because you get something out of them with no downside. So that's just, you know, goodbye, our friend the Badger Bear. Not like he got much play anyway, but he's just completely power crept. So, okay. I'm going to end the stream there. I'll probably play a bit later. Start building, probably start building dragons. The Demacia Targon Dragons is, I think, a really good deck. I think that's just going to be pretty absurd. So, um, good luck to everyone climbing in the new season. Looking forward to it. All right, peace.